Welcome, everyone. I'm Mike Skinner with Skinner Technology Group and wanted to welcome you to our webinar today about Microsoft 365 security. With me today, I have Stephan from Augmentt. Augmentt is one of our key partners here at Skinner Technology Group. So I wanted to have Stephan come on today and talk about his background and his knowledge of Microsoft 365 security. Stephan's the head of customer success at Augmentt, so he definitely works with a lot of clients and a lot of MSPs who are providing Microsoft 365 services to their customers. So, Stephan, I'll pass it over to you.
Perfect. Thank you very much for the intro there, Mike. As Mike said, I'm head of customer success here at Augmentt. And what we do here at Augmentt is we supply security tools for the cloud so that MSPs can manage applications like M365 and ensure that all of your business and client data stays nice and safe. What I've got ready for you today is just a quick presentation to sort of walk you through some of the changes that have been happening recently that affect your Microsoft environments, what we can do to help respond to some of those changes, and how we can also ensure that all that data stays secure for you. So we just have a couple of quick slides, and what we'll do is we'll cover how the threat landscape has changed for most businesses post-pandemic. We'll cover some of the security implications of that to your M365 environment, and then we'll let you know how we can help you protect that environment and make sure that your data stays safe. So to kick off, I think it's fair to say that since the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of companies are facing more security threats than they had previously. And a lot of this is due to the fact that with the pandemic starting, a lot of companies decided to start working remotely and move their solutions to the cloud faster than they would have done previously. And we're still slated for 2023, 2024 to be the highest rate of adoption for cloud users ever that we've seen. So this is something that's going to keep happening. But with the advent of the cloud, there are now new vectors for bad actors to try and gain access to our environments. That little heat map that you see up on the screen there is epicenters for people who are trying to run brute force attacks on M365 environments. And I can tell you a couple of years ago that map wasn't as hot as it is now. So more and more bad actors are trying to get access to your cloud environment as time goes by. And something that we've seen from the data that we work with here in North America is that breaches specifically around cloud security have gone up 775% since the outset of the pandemic. So that's a massive increase. So this is definitely a clear and present danger and something that's not going away anytime soon. So the sooner we can get ahead of this and stay on top of our cloud security, the safer all of our environments are going to be. Now, in that 775%, you're probably wondering where most of those attacks are going. Well, the most targeted app in the world currently is Microsoft 365. And that's because for 95% of users in the world, it is your most business critical application that you use on a day-to-day basis. It's where most of your employees are going to be managing their day-to-day lives. It's where your contracts are going to live. It's where a lot of your sensitive and proprietary information is housed. So this is obviously something that we should be working quite stringently to secure. One of the things that's becoming more and more important when protecting this is being able to set up controls as to who can access our Microsoft environment. And the reason for that is that it's very cheap to run attacks against a company like Microsoft. And why would that be? Well, there's a whole ecosystem of bad actors who make their money by targeting Microsoft and getting information from it. And you might be saying to yourself, I'm a small company and I operate in a niche vertical. People aren't going to be looking to come and get my data. And you're sort of half right there. People aren't specifically looking for you. However, they are looking for easy accounts and Microsoft environments to breach, which just means that if one of your usernames and passwords was leaked, you're now on that list. And it's very cheap to then run an attack from somebody on that list. If I was to hire somebody for a one-off job, it's as cheap as $250. Ransomware kits are only $66 up front, or you can do a revenue share opportunity with the creator of that ransomware technology, give them a 35% cut. I could breach an individual device for a few cents, or a mobile device for a couple of dollars. And when we get into things like phishing and spear phishing, the people are getting paid up to $100 per successful breach. Now, where it gets really frightening is how cheap it is to buy usernames and passwords off the dark web. So, for under $1, I could buy 1,000 pairs of usernames and passwords. And if I wanted to buy in bulk, $150, I could get 400 million pairs of usernames and passwords. That's more than the whole population of the United States. And I could run a quick automation to try and brute force my way in through those credentials. So it's really simple. It's really cheap to run these breaches. It's something that we definitely have to look at by helping configure our security access controls, and also how we're backing up the sensitive data that we do house in Microsoft. And on that point, there's something really important that we have to talk about with Microsoft before we get started on how we'll protect you. And that is that security doesn't come configured out of the box. There are some basic measures in place, like having a username and password. However, Microsoft themselves says in their own documentation that those aren't the only controls that are required to ensure that you stay safe. So it's a really good idea to work with partners like the Skinner Group, who can help you configure all of those security options. Make sure you have the right configuration for the type of business that you're running, and that no one is able to get access to that sensitive company information. The other thing that I just wanted to reinforce now is that Microsoft is not a out-of-the-box backup solution. In fact, in their own documentation, they will heavily recommend that you go to a third-party tool to do Microsoft backups, because their built-in retention policy is very short. And just because something is saved to your Exchange server does not mean that it's backed up. So that could be lost at any point. Now, there is some good news here, and that is that we can protect your Microsoft environment by doing a couple of very easy things that we just have to make sure are applied across the board. First, we want to make sure that we have least privileged access to all of our accounts. And that means that only the right people have the right access to the right applications at the right time. And so we can do that by making sure that people have different access levels in their Microsoft environment, so that if anyone was breached, even on that account, they wouldn't have the access needed to do any damage to your Microsoft environment. The second thing we can do, and what Microsoft recommends for all of our users, is we can enforce MFA across the board for every one of our users. And MFA is just multi-factor authentication. It's the same principle that your bank has been using for the last 30 years, where they ask you for something like your mother's maiden name just to assure that you are the right person. That's what we're doing, just electronically for your Microsoft environment. And this is the main thing that we can do to keep people out of your environment. Now, how easy is it for us to prevent a breach? Well, we can do 3 easy things to make sure that we're reducing the possibility of getting breached in your Microsoft environment. The first thing we're going to do is make sure that our MFA is enforced for both our admin accounts and for our user accounts. And what that's going to do is lock the front door of our house there. The second thing we're going to do is start to enforce mail forwarding rules and attachment protection on all of the emails you're receiving through Microsoft. And that's going to make sure that we don't have any malware or anything like that coming through on attachments that we click on, and potentially dropping some ransomware into our environment there. And the third thing we can do is reduce phishing attacks and spear phishing attacks by making sure that we have unified audit logs, we have sharing rules set up on what's being able to be shared inside and outside of our organization, and that we have guest access rules, so none of our guest users have access to any sensitive client information in our environment. Now, after setting up those 3 controls, if anything does get through the net, That's not a problem. We have the ability to identify suspicious activity in real time and take the appropriate steps to make sure that that account and in that environment is secured by doing things like password resets, blocking their access to Microsoft, and signing them out of all their Microsoft apps so that they have to re-authenticate to get back in. So really simple ways, but really effective ways for us to secure your Microsoft environment, make sure all that company and client information stays safe. And now that the information is safe, we want to ensure that if anything happens to the environment, we're able to bring that information back and we're able to restore all of that very valuable client and company information. And the way we're going to do that is by backing up your M365. Now, you may think that saving a contract to your emails or keeping it as an attachment in one of your email threads is backing up your information. Unfortunately, that's not the case. We have just saved it to the equivalent of somebody else's computer, but that data is still vulnerable to deletion or to being lost if there was a compromise in the environment. Now, a really great example of this happening in real life happened back in December of 22, where a cloud service provider called Rackspace was breached with a ransomware attack. That attack exposed over 30,000 of their Exchange Online users. And although it was never confirmed whether they paid the ransom or not, IBM estimates that the average payment for a ransomware attack in 2022 is $4.5 million. So the cost of not setting up those 3 easy breach protection practices could be as much as $4.5 million if you want to retain the information that you have in your environment. Now, one of the reasons that we might think that Rackspace did not back up their environment is that they never officially said if they paid the ransom or not, which might indicate that they did, which would mean that their backups weren't good enough that they could restore their environment straight out of the box and negate the ransomware attack. So not only does the backup ensure that our data is safe, if we are ever breached by a bad actor, we can take away their tools to hurt us. So I would highly recommend that that you do engage in a backup practice. And as we said earlier, Microsoft recommends themselves that you use a third-party tool to do this. And we'll be able to give you a lot more details on how we can back up your data a little bit later on. Now, other concerns that that might have us relying on a backup as well. Some user error, accidentally deleted the wrong contract at the wrong time. Maybe we have document retention policies based on one of our compliances, so we need to save company or client data for a 7-year period. In case any hackers or malicious ransomware does make it onto our environment, we'd want to be able to back up our data to a point before it was corrupted. You might have malicious insiders, disgruntled employees coming in or leaving the business, maybe trying to take or delete any information they were bringing with them. And of course, if any of our hardware does fail, we want to make sure that we can back up our environment so that for the new incoming piece of hardware, we still have all that data that we need. Now, the good news is this: for all of those extra services, it would only be an $8 lift on your Microsoft Business Premium subscription. So for a total of $30, you can get all of your Microsoft Premium services, the ability to audit and configure your security posture to maintain a strong security baseline, to be able to respond to incoming threats in real time in under 5 minutes, and to make sure that all of the data that you have on your Microsoft environment is backed up and can be restored at a moment's notice.
Well, that's great.
Yeah, let's say this one. I'll hand over to Mike to wrap us up.
Yes, thank you, Stephan. That was a lot of great information. I just really want to reinforce some of the points that you made for our clients and friends that we're providing this video to. The attackers, they are paying or getting paid $250 per job. People are able to pay a very small amount and hire a hacker to hack into an organization. What does that mean? That means it's going to continue to grow in frequency and really grow in impact. The other thing, Microsoft security is not configured out of the box, and it's for that matter. I mean, many cloud solutions, even the Googles out there, Google workspaces, any cloud solution is going to need some configuration to get that security configured as your organization needs it. So that's important to remember. Just using a cloud service doesn't remove your responsibility to make sure that it's securely configured. Microsoft themselves recommending third-party backup. And, Stephan, you talked about the Rackspace breach and the impact on Rackspace, the company. But if you think about all of the users of those hosted Exchange environments, they couldn't access their email for weeks, and some still don't have access to that email. Rackspace was actually giving vouchers to their customers to move to Office 365. Once they moved to Office 365, some of these customers, most of the customers, didn't have the email to move with it. So they were starting fresh. So all of that historical email was gone.
Was lost.
That's why we stress the importance, even though you're hosting with a cloud provider such as Microsoft, we're talking about today, you have to back it up. We cannot rely solely on their backup. You want it in two places.
Absolutely. And just to add to that, I think one of the things that sort of people might struggle with at the very beginning is that security is definitely a process. It's not a product that we can sort of bolt on to a subscription there and make sure it's always there. It's something that's ever changing, ever evolving. People are always looking for new ways to get into our data. So we have to maintain that same level of proactive security monitoring to make sure that we stay on top of it.
Absolutely. And that's a good segue into my last point. You showed some very nice screenshots from the Augmentt tool. And as I mentioned at the start, Augmentt is a tool that we use to monitor Office 365 security. So for our clients, we are the eyes on that dashboard that you showed earlier, Stephan. So this isn't adding an additional layer of work to even internal IT teams where we're doing co-managed services. We're monitoring the information that Augmentt provides, and then we are able to communicate it directly to the business or internal IT. So things that Augmentt really focuses on, and I think monitors well, multi-factor authentication, the mail forwarding rules. 95% of the business email compromises that I've seen over the past 3 years have had mail forwarding rules on them. So the person whose email was breached never sees the emails coming back to them.
Exactly. And I believe that email attachments is the second most common vector for any malware or ransomware to get inside your business.
Yep. Yeah, everybody knows these days not to put a random thumb drive in your computer, but for some reason, attachments pretty easily. And then, logging. Logging is critical, and making sure that it's turned on, enabled, and that it's actually reviewed. If we're not reviewing the logs, then really we're just wasting space collecting them. And then the last thing that you mentioned that I just want to reinforce the importance: sharing rules and guest access. With OneDrive, SharePoint, we're sharing all of our information with our business partners externally. We need to make sure we have a good wrap on who all has access and do they have access to what exactly they need. So those are all services that we provide using technology that we talked about today, the Augmentt tool. So you'll see on the screen there a QR code. If you want more information, go ahead and snap that and get in touch with us. And we look forward to serving you in the future. Thanks, Stephan, for joining us today.
Thank you, Mike.